This is a lengthy story, but I didn't think I could leave out any details, so this is my apology ahead of time. My story takes place over a period of time while I worked as a cashier in an Asian fast food restaurant during high school. I was one of our best workers, and always very friendly to the customers, so therefore I worked basically all the time. On one of our slower days, a man came into the restaurant when it was only one of my managers and I working the floor. He had quite the impressive beer belly, a set of teeth which could make any dentist cringe, and ice blue, bloodshot eyes. He explained that he had never eaten there before, and was just passing through for a few days because he was a truck driver and was waiting on a shipment or something. Being a customer-friendly gal I am, I gave him some suggestions and made small talk like I do with most of our customers. Well, he decided to take the small talk to a completely new level, as he began to openly talk about his drug abuse, and about how the truck company gave up drug testing him because he would constantly fail. Oh, okay, nice. Being reasonably freaked out, I eventually got him away from the cash register and got him to sit down at a table. I usually stayed behind the cash register and busied myself, but because we weren't busy, I served all the food and cleaned all the tables, and therefore it was easy for him to keep making conversation with me. He kept asking me random questions about places he could visit to pass his time, and whatever else he could think to talk about. Along with that, he prolonged his visit there by constantly ordering cups on cups of our wonton soup. Arguably because it's pretty good soup, but I'm almost positive it was because he wanted an excuse to talk to me. Once he finally left, my manager and I joked about how strange he was and then continued on with our night. The following day we were extremely busy during lunch hour, and I was working on overdrive trying to get through to a long line of people. I was completely preoccupied when, lo and behold, my drug addict trucker friend comes up to my register. He told me how much he enjoyed the food the previous day, and also how much he enjoyed my company. Major red flag. Before he left to find a seat, he told me that he would definitely be back up at the cash register to talk to me again and order some more wonton soup. Great. Needless to say, I avoided the shit out of him the entire time he was there. Even though he kept trying to speak to me whenever I passed and was constantly looking around the restaurant for me, I stayed the hell away from him. A little bit later, my intimidating badass manager and I were at the cash register doing our thing, when I couldn't help but notice him constantly looking at our entrance. All of a sudden he left the cash register in a hurry. When he returned, I asked him what that was all about, and he proceeded to tell me that my good pal kept entering in and out of the restaurant and pacing outside of our windows looking at me, so he left to go tell him to fuck off. At this point I'm so scared I can't even contain myself. Being an avid reader of this subreddit, I immediately thought the worst. Shaken up, I completed my night at the restaurant, but I was reassured when I remembered that it was his last day in town, and that he lives in New York, which is pretty far away from the Midwest where I live. I truly believed this would be the last encounter with this creep. Months had passed, and I had put the incident in the back of my mind, when all of a sudden you-know-who walks up to the door higher than a kite. My stomach dropped, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. He stepped right up to the cash register, and immediately told me that my haircut looked really good. I'm literally pissing myself at this point. I said thank you and asked what he would like to order. He ignored my question and just kept repeating to me, "You don't remember me?" over and over again. I thought it would be best not to play into whatever fantasy he had, and I said I didn't. I tried again to ask him what he would like to order, and he told me just a cup of wonton soup, and that he would be back up to order more. All the while, in between breaths, he kept muttering, "You don't remember me?" It was obvious he was high off something, so I ignored him and verbally pushed him to sit down. But before he left, he looked at me with his yellow crooked smile and said, "I'll see you soon." Nope. No. Definitely no. All the people I was working with that night were pretty big guys who were very protective of me, so I did feel a little safer, but on the inside I was still in shock. I told my one coworker the entire story, and he said he would walk me to my car after closing. Oddly, the man left pretty much without saying a word to me his entire visit, which didn't settle well with me at all. When 9 p.m. hit and I was done, my coworker upheld his promise and walked me to my car. As we were walking, we heard an angry voice muttering closely behind us, along with steps gaining speed. In no time, my coworker turns around and pulls out his pocket knife, waves it for him to see in the dark, and screams at the man to fuck off or else he will slit his throat. All of a sudden, the man freaked out, turned around, and sprinted in the opposite direction. My coworker continued to walk me to my car. and calmed me down, seeing as I was extremely shaken up. I drove home completely paranoid and hysterical, in utter amazement of what could have happened to me. For other reasons, I quit my job soon after, and have since never seen that disgusting man again. But to this day, I cannot help but feel uneasy whenever I pass a truck, and to this creeper's delight, I will, in fact, never forget him.
So this happened earlier this month. I'm not sure how much actual danger I was in, but it creeped the absolute shit out of me. I was working a job out of town that had put me up in a hotel. The hotel was nice and all, but because of some issues, the rest of the crew was staying in one on the other side of town. This made after work beers much less convenient, and the fact that this hotel was almost completely vacant except for just me added to the weird factor. Anyway, about 3 days into the gig, I'm too tired to meet up with everyone else, but not too tired to drink a beer in the hotel hot tub, which I proceeded to do by myself, like some sort of lonely, wet alcoholic. I'm feeling pretty good, and slightly buzzed, after a relaxing soak, and I'm drying off when I hear this sound. It's very hard to describe, kind of like a bulldog struggling to breathe or something. Very animalish. And since the hot tub area was outside, I'd start looking around, expecting to see a wounded raccoon or something. To my surprise, the source of the noise came rounding the corner, and it was a dude. A shirtless, shoeless, super jacked dude with long hair and crazy eyes. Like the kind of eyes that say, "I'm out of my mind," or on something, or both. And he's snapping at the air like a dog and making those weird animal sounds. Now, I'm also a dude, and while I'm not a pacifist, I'm also not a fan of getting into fights with crazy people after getting half a buzz in a hot tub on a work night. So I just start discreetly putting my shirt on, trying not to acknowledge the weirdo or make eye contact, and I exit on the opposite side of the caged-off pool area. As I'm exiting, I sneak a quick glance at my new friend, and I see him pulling a harmonica out of his pocket. I hear him begin to play it as I'm fast walking away. Then it got weirder. I turn a corner and have to walk along one side of the building and across the courtyard and turn another corner to get to the elevator that will take me to the safety of my room. As I'm going, I hear this harmonica song getting louder and louder. I'm looking around, expecting to see him behind me, but I don't see him anywhere. The music keeps getting louder and louder, and my head is on the goddamn swivel as I finally get to the elevator. I slam the button, and as the door opens, the music suddenly stops. I think that scared me more than anything. I turned around, ready to see him jumping at me, but there was nothing. I backed into the elevator and punched the button floor like it just made fun of my mom. Got up to the 3rd deck and just about sprinted to my room. As the door was slamming behind me, the music started again. I sat there with the deadbolt bolted and could hear the harmonica on and off at various volume levels throughout the night. This happened around 9:30 or so, and the last time I heard it was around 2 a.m., shortly before I finally fell asleep. Didn't see the guy again for the rest of my stay. Not even sure if I'm overreacting or what. But I still get goosebumps thinking about that wild-eyed dude, just patrolling this huge, nearly vacant hotel, playing his little song on the harmonica. So, animal noise expert and amateur harmonica player, let's not ever fucking meet again.
This happened in 2013 when I was living in the city with 2 roommates. We're all women, and we were going to school. I wrote everything down immediately after it happened, intending to, 1, have a record of any detail should it become important later since the police didn't want to file a report, and 2, share it someday. Never ended up sharing it until now, having recently discovered the subreddit. This isn't a horror story so much as it is maybe a story about stumbling onto the aftermath of someone else's, but I was still pretty spooked at the time. I live in a pretty old house. It's at least 100 years old, which is typical of the area, but the inside appears to have been gutted and remodeled at some point in its history. Mostly that translates to weirdly sized closets, but it also meant that there was no pre-designed space for the water heater to go. Putting it in the house would have sacrificed space in one of the closets, so they installed it and the heating system under the house in a crude, dirt-floored crawl space. This became relevant last month, when a city utility worker needed to get to my hot water heater. The sole entrance to the crawl space is out back, under the little deck we share in the neighboring unit. It's a little wooden door padlocked shut. It had been padlocked since I had moved in. I don't even think I knew it was there for the first couple of months. So I called the rental company and they sent a guy over who unlocked it but didn't look inside. When the utility worker arrived sometime later, it was already getting dark, so I went down with her just in case she needed me to hand her anything. I felt kind of bad that she was out after standard working hours, and about to crawl into the cramped, dirty, and undoubtedly spidery space under my house. She opens the little door, shines her flashlight inside, and goes, "Well, that's kind of creepy." Since she just told me she was used to crawl spaces and not scared of them, I started to get pretty uneasy, and fervently hoped that we had not just discovered a body. I'm not gonna lie, I had been low-key expecting to stumble onto a corpse since I was like 5. With that in mind, what we did find was actually kind of underwhelming. Inside the cramped space under the house, lit by the tech's flashlight, was an improvised camp setup, a sleeping bag on a stack of filthy foam camping mattresses, a suitcase spilling clothes out on the dirt, a clothesline hung with yet more clothes, food and drink wrappers, and stacks of newspapers. She was surprisingly chill about it. I wanted her to get out immediately so that we could call the police. Not because I thought anybody was still in there, but because I was worried the improvised camp under my house might constitute some kind of crime scene. I was pretty confident that it must be old. We'd had a home invasion a couple months ago, so we'd all really been vigilant. And I figured that since we kept irregular schedules and parked out back, we'd have seen a squatter coming and going. There was also no smell, due to a couple of stupid decisions earlier in my youth. I'd discovered people squatting in an abandoned building before, and they'd always had the odor of stale urine. But she'd insisted that since we had the door open, she'd go in and get the heater working again. I probably should have insisted, but she honestly didn't seem that disturbed, and I figured she knew what she was doing. She found a little pull chain connected to a bare bulb and pulled it, which lit the whole place in weak yellow light, showing her the way to the appliance. It wasn't enough to light the entire crawl space, but it was enough that I could see that whoever had lived there had made a couple of shelves out of milk crates. She fixed what she'd come to fix, and sat with me until the cops came. I kind of expected them to tell me that what I was seeing had to be something else, but actually they refused to look inside of the crawl space. I suspect because it was starting to rain, and seemed to take my account at face value. They just didn't want to do anything about it, and told me that it was really my landlord's problem. Not really the response I'd expected, but whatever. This all ends very anticlimactically. I called the rental agency and told them about it, and they sent a crew out to throw out all of the stuff and re-secure the crawl space. I wasn't able to be there when they did it, but I asked them to find the most recent newspaper and give me the date, so that I could get some kind of timeline for when this person had been under the house. It was June of 2011, 2 years before we moved in. I was able to find out from the rental guy that the house was occupied at the time, but that was all I found out.
When I was in college, I used to take angst walks around my neighborhood at night. As a single woman, not the greatest idea, I grant you, but I always thought it was safe enough. One night, I was a few blocks from home, and no one was around. I was listening to my iPod when suddenly a car drove up from behind me and slowed to keep pace with me. The driver rolled the passenger side window down. I was walking on the passenger side of the car and started saying something to me. I pulled my headphones out and said, Sorry? What? The car had tinted windows, and it was so dark inside that I couldn't see a face, just a human-shaped blob. He was whispering words, but they were so quiet I couldn't make them out. Thinking he needed directions or something, I leaned closer to the passenger window and said again, "Sorry?" He was still whispering, and I leaned a little closer. But then, I was overwhelmed by this feeling that he was whispering to get me to lean in through the window, and that something bad was going to happen. I stood up straight and backed onto the sidewalk. I very loudly said, "I can't hear you," just as another car passed behind him. I heard a very distinct voice from the driver's seat yell, "Fine," and he slammed on his gas pedal and sped away while the window rolled back up. I got home, called campus security, and made a report. A few weeks later, a girl was kidnapped close to campus and gang raped, then dumped onto the side of the road. They never caught the guys who did it. Who knows if that could have been me?
Hey guys, it's Blue Spooky here. I just wanted to thank you all for watching, especially if you made it to the end here. And I wanted to give a super special shout out to a fellow narrator, Dark Stories, who helped me with 2 of these stories. She's pretty good, so you should go check out her YouTube channel. As always, please feel free to leave any comments or constructive criticism. And also, if you have any stories you'd like me to read or any personal stories, send them to the links in the description below. Thank you guys so much for watching.